My name is Maniza Naqvi, and this is the 29th episode of the Little Book Company podcast. My guest today is Niilofur Farrukh. She is a Karachi-based art interventionist, art historian, critic, curator, author, and activist whose seminal initiatives have expanded the space for art publication, curation, and public art in Pakistan. Her primary interest lies in issues of decolonization, and as a writer-curator, her focus has been on the excavation of lost interdisciplinary connections within the cultural matrix. Niilofur, welcome.
Thank you, Maniza. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for agreeing to do this podcast with me. And first, explain to me what an art interventionist is.
Actually, when I was looking at my body of work over the last 30 odd years, I was thinking most of my work lies in space or the whole energy has gone into creating a project where there was a gap or there was a vacuum or enhancing projects which I felt needed to be kind of more out there and to be made visible. So I think that has been one of the things, because sometimes when you're concerned with something and you see all these gaps, then obviously there is a need to address them. So, I think that's what I think is meant by this whole idea of intervention.
What kind of gaps?
Well, there have been several kind of gaps. When we look at the disconnect, which is it's a colonial legacy between artisanal practices and art. When we look at, let's say, the Mughal period, there was a kind of a synergy between these two. People who worked with the hand, the people who conceptualized, the craftsmen, as well as the people who were looking or pushing new ideas, were all working together. But throughout the colonial period, they were separated. One was sort of treated as a person who just had the craft. He wasn't looked upon as a person with a mind, a person who was creative and could work independently and, kind of take things forward. They were just made to do things almost like a manual factory. While the people who were artists, and this is the legacy again from a Eurocentric kind of idea, that who were artists were primarily not so concerned with skills, even if they had some kind of drafting or painting skills, but they were the ones who were, let's say, the people who pushed ideas. They were conceptualizers. So I think the whole idea of bringing it back together is what we did in ASNA. And I think that was an intervention.
So ASNA was a non-profit that you founded?
Yes. Yes, I did it with two other people. There was this textile designer called Shahnaz Siddiq and Meher Afroz, of course, the well-known artist. We all felt this need to bring the two together and to also have conversations about the possibility of taking from artisanal practices their techniques, and particularly for ceramists, this would be interesting because a lot of ceramists weren't continuing their work after art school. They didn't have a kiln, they didn't have a potter's wheel, and we felt that if they connected with the kumhars, which are the traditional potters, they could set up studios without too much expense, and also looked at their techniques and worked within that vocabulary of form. That would kind of help them to develop a practice that was truly anchored in our tradition.
Was that, that's marvelous. Was this anchored in Sindh or across Pakistan?
Actually, we were inviting a lot of kumhars. We used to have this Asna Clay Triennale, in which contemporary ceramists were invited from all over the world. The region at that time ceramists from India could also cross over the border. We had Bangladesh, we had people from Nepal, and even Iran. So the whole region, we had people. And then then part of that exhibition used to be the Kumhar Mela, in which we would invite Kumhars or potters from all over Pakistan, right from Swat, Balochistan, Sindh, of course, Punjab, KPK. We used to invite them and obviously, kind of make, sort of commission them to create work, because a lot of them don't have a body of work. They make it just to sell it. So we used to commission them and, of course, sort of take care of them, their travel and everything when they came. So it used to be an interesting way to expose them to different possibilities here in Karachi, which is this big city. People from designers could look at their work and, commission them. Ceramists obviously were looking at their work and their techniques. So at many levels, there were these interactions.
And when did this start, Niilofur? When were you doing?
We had the first exhibition, which was called Matti Ki Sargoshi, or the Whispers of Clay, in the late 90s. And that was this major exhibition with 400 pots at the Fair Hall, where we just kind of introduced to people the wonderful and absolutely stunning, body of unglazed and glazed ceramics in Pakistan. And that was just, kind of the traditional pottery. And out of that came ASNA Clay Triennale. We had 3 triennales. Well, the first one was in the early 2000s, and then we had 3 of them, but we couldn't sustain them, unfortunately, for several reasons.
Why?
Yeah.
What were the reasons?
Well, the main reasons I would think were what was happening is the art schools began to kind of either shut down or downscale their ceramic departments, which in the late 90s and early 2000s were very robust. And they started scaling them down. Instead of giving a degree in it, they were making it a minor. Some of them couldn't sustain it because there weren't enough jobs for the graduates. Like ceramic industries, like sanitary ware and even tableware had not developed to that extent to absorb them. All they were really doing is getting commissions with architects and, of course, doing their own studio pottery. So I think the opportunities were less. So, and of course, the schools weren't ready to kind of sustain it. So there was a kind of dropping interest. And that was one reason. Second, of course, is that, there is no government funding available. So, you can sustain something for a while, and then you're hoping that you will get that kind of a support, which wasn't available. So, a lot of the projects in Pakistan tend to suffer that way. They're good, effective projects, but they're not sustainable because at one point, they need to be state support. Once you've sort of introduced them.
These are essential parts of the social fabric and do require government support.
So I think that wasn't available. So, we did it as much as we could. Then also there were tensions with India because a lot of our ceramics would come from India. A lot of policies changed in which we could not just get the ceramics. People couldn't courier them to us because of the customs and things like that. Previously, for several years, we just, got them, they were just couriered to us. Then certain policies changed on duty and things. So, things became quite difficult for a period. And we felt, it was not possible to continue.
And you mentioned 2 women that were very much a part of this effort with us. There was
Shahnaz Siddique and Meher Afroz, both of them.
And Meher Afroz. And Shanaz, is she the head of Indus Valley Art School?
No. Shanaz Siddique is a textile designer, also like Shanaz Ismail, but she's totally different person.
Okay. And of course, Meher Afroz is a wonderful artist.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And an artist that you have actually written about.
Yes, extensively, yes.
In fact, is your most recent book about Meher Afroz's art?
Yes, it is. It's an anthology of essays which I commissioned as the editor of the book. And we are looking at her practice of over almost 50 plus years and her journey right from being a printmaker to the kind of, artist, mixed media, whatever, kind of experimental practice she has. And she's also been doing performative work and installations. So she's kind of had a very long, influential practice.
And what is the most interesting aspect that captures you of her art?
Actually, my journey with her has been a very long one, almost as long as her art practice, because she came to the art school where I was studying in the 1970s as a young graduate from Lucknow Art College. And so she was just, maybe in her early 20s, so were we, and we were just the final batch, I think, or we were in third year. So we got to know her, and she was teaching in the fine arts department. I was in the design department, and, we kind of got to know each other. And over all these years, she's been a friend, a mentor, someone, whose work I have looked at right from the beginning. Basically what fascinates me, or did in the early years, was her textures, her ability to create textures. It was a language that she was a master of. She could create these most sensitive textures, almost as if something, it was an emotional thing almost, the texture. And through that, she could speak about her own, feelings or whatever she wanted to convey. And this displacement from India to Pakistan was not an easy one. And I think she created a language of textures to talk about it, a kind of something that made you feel uneasy, Anyway, that was, but over the years, she's looked at tradition. I think her role has also been one who's developed this dialogue with decolonization. She has not given up her own traditional kind of, understanding of culture. She comes from Lucknow, which has a very distinct culture, and she held on to it. Obviously, it underwent a lot of change through exposure to Karachi, which is a very multicultural society. And, she retained some of those values and yet changed as a person, taking on, and reading material from her new homeland, her new environment. So, but decolonization in the sense that when she looks at, let's say, social values, it's always through that lens. And also her art, sometimes people think it's a little esoteric, but with her, she has a very deep belief in what she does. And the kind of it's also a continuum of the tradition in which she was born. So, and she doesn't compromise there. It can change. It can become very contemporary looking, but the underlying thread is the same.
Would
so
you think that she is that bridge between she is the embodiment of art and craft?
Not essentially craft, because her work is, sort of, is very painterly in many ways. She does look at craft, yes, some of the stitching, and she looks at fabric, and she looks at Pevandkari, which is like darning, because the society, the time she grew up, when she was growing up, people were kind of modest in their, kind of ways. So to mend something and to use it wasn't considered bad. It wasn't like something passe that, you've done it now, let's move on to the next fashion. People they cherish these traditional, costumes, and they use them. So Pevandkari, which is darning or mending things, was very much a part of that tradition. Then, of course, she comes from the Shia tradition, where there's a lot of ornamentation in the alam, in the masnad, which is, there is this whole azadari. So, with all that kind of thing, she grew up in Lucknow, which was really the center of the whole practice of Muharram and all the, things connected with it. So I think all that exposure has given it a very interesting kind of aesthetic vocabulary and aesthetic understanding, which is quite different from someone growing up in Karachi, who may have seen Azadari and Tazia and everything, but will not maybe connect to it in the same way. So I think Meher brings with her this very rich tradition. And then she also uses it to kind of speak out against injustice. She talks about certain concerns within society. So, I think from that perspective, she has a courageous practice as well. She speaks about things that she feels strongly about. And I think all these things really do attract me as someone who's consistently out there developing her practice.
And you also started NuktaArt, because I was listening to the way you have, reviewed Meher's art for us right now. I just think this is a point to bring in NuktaArt, which you were the founding editor of.
Yes. Again, this was a collaborative project. There were 4 of us, a designer, a graphic designer, who was really good at editorial design, and 3 art critics. That was Sabiha Imani was the designer, and Amra Ali and Romana Hussain and myself. We were writing for different newspapers, and we were very, unhappy about that, because they just wanted reviews from us. There was no room for larger essays, and, sort of a discourse, basically. They just wanted us to go to an exhibition, review it, and then write on it. I think some of us started doing that in the early period. Like, I started writing extensively in the 90s. And, after a while, you realize that there is much more to it than just reviews. There's a whole discourse out there that needs to be talked about. So we decided that we needed to have a magazine where these essays, research, and different facets of, the art scene could be made visible. So we founded the NuktaArt, which was something, we had 2 issues every year. And it was this well-printed, kind of quite, a lot of material in it. Yeah.
What would have been the year that you started this?
2004, I think. Yeah, 2004. I'm not very good with years, but I think it's 2004, because in 2014, we ended it. We did a 10-year stint. Again, the same thing like ASNA, it was expensive. The printing, everything, changed because the currency devalued. And I mean, there were so many other issues. But it was 10 years, yes. We took out 19 issues, yes.
19 issues, and did you have those on subscription, or were they?
Yeah, they were on subscription. People could subscribe, and a lot of institutions in the country and abroad did, subscribe them. And then they were also sold in bookshops throughout the country. Yeah, and art schools,
Were there
galleries.
Were there other art journals like this, like NuktaArt in Pakistan at that time?
But actually, when we started, I don't think there were any. But later on, ADA came on board. ADA started, as you know, ADA is art, design, and architecture. They started it, and then Art Now also, started. Art Now started right at the end when we were, just kind of struggling. And they went online, which was very good. They because they started at the time when you could have this internet presence, and yeah, that's how it was.
Then, were you ever connected to the Arts Council of Karachi, Niilofur?
Well, not well. We all in the 1970s and 80s, we were all members. We were all life members because that was the thing, done thing. Everybody joined. And then there was this little art school over there on the second floor where Mr. Imam was there. It was called the Central Institute of Arts and Crafts. That's where I went for art school because there were only two art schools in Karachi, the Karachi School of Art and the Central Institute of Arts and Crafts. It was a 4-year thing. We were there for that. And then later on, many, many years later, Meher was also there, of course, teaching, and Bashir Mirza, we had Ahmed Pervez come in and out, Shakir Saab come in and out. So Ali Imam was the principal in the beginning, and later on, Kohari took over. So it was this very kind of inspiring place for all of us because we had all these artists in and out of the place. You could have conversations with them. They were very accessible. And then many, many years later, I was on the board. I was invited to be on the board of that institution. So, this was that kind of journey. Now, apparently, a new institution has opened there, which is kind of connected to the old one, but it's a new entity altogether. The registration is new, the name is changed.
What is it called?
It's called the Arts Council's Institute of Art and Craft, something to that effect. Yeah.
So in a way, that's great, isn't it? That tradition is going to continue of a place where people can come and learn art.
I think it's important, but what happens is, in my mind, an evolution should take place. A place which was so run by some of the best artists, the best minds, creative minds of the time. It went into a dip and sadly never came up to be of the same standard. You have to have a certain, creative environment. Even the Arts Council gallery does not have that kind of shows. When I was at the art school, they would have these, shows. One was an annual art show, which had all the leading artists of the country. And then the second thing was all these people who were exhibiting. Ahmed Pervez, Lubna Agha, Zahudul Akhlaq had his major show after he returned from Slade. Gulgee was there. So, that kind of presence, I think the Arts Council needs to go back to it. It needs to very consciously bring back that kind of, let us say, environment. And you have to work at it. You have to make people feel that they're respected, that this is a place where only, excellence is respected. Yeah.
Where there's an open environment that respects and
nurtures creativity
and vision rather than just skill.
Yeah, absolutely. And also there's an open, it's very difficult to explain, but when you facilitate, people who come there and people who are serious about art and art discourse, these things happen naturally. You have to be a facilitator, and the Arts Council at that time was a facilitating environment, had a facilitating environment.
And these years that you spent there, 4 years in art school on the second floor, what were those, Niilofur?
Well, I joined in 1970 and I left in 74. So yeah, this is way back, way back. We just had a reunion. It's 50 years actually, you know. So it's amazing. Half a century has gone by.
Yeah. Where did you meet your husband?
Oh, that's a good question. Through art, of course. The principal, Rashid Ahmed Arshad, he, before he joined CIAC, he was the art teacher at Habib School. And my husband was at Habib. So, there was some project they were doing for RCD at that time. And he came to Arshad Saab and he said he wanted students involved in it. There was this big program they were having. I think it was the anniversary of Persepolis or some such thing. And, because RCD, as you know, was that regional network with Iran, Turkey, and, Pakistan. And so, they came on board and we were all there, our students, and we mingled and met them. It was a group of people. Rehana Hakim, by the way, was in that group of RCD Students Association. She was also there, who is, as you know, that celebrated Newsline editor. And I say celebrated because I have tremendous respect for her. So we met there. Yeah.
Wow, that is so interesting, and of course the connection between your being in the arts and your husband being an architect.
Not an architect. He wasn't an architect. He was a businessman. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Sorry, I seem to have obviously I've gotten that very wrong.
It doesn't matter. It happens. No, he was in he had a family business where he was working, but he was very interested in art. In fact, in our collection, all the sculpture is his. He's the one who's bought all the sculpture, the three-dimensional work. Well, I was the one interested more in two-dimensional and ceramics. So when we built our collection, it was very interesting because he used to go out there and when he saw a sculptural piece, he would love it, So it was interesting how we both collected.
And then you were also the president of the Pakistan section of the Paris-based International Art Critics Association, AIC.
Yes. Actually, it started with Jalal Saab. You remember Jalaluddin Ahmed? When he came back to Pakistan, this is the late 90s. He had been in London. He was taking out art in the Islamic world. And, he had this very cosmopolitan way of looking at these connections between art and the Islamic world, between, Pakistan and the rest of the world. So he was constantly, kind of building bridges. So he came back and he said, well, we must start a local chapter. And in fact, he was a part of a local chapter in the 1940s when Shahid Sohrawardi was there. As you know, Shahid Sohrawardi was this tremendous, intellectual, Shahid or Shahid Sohrawardi, that these two cousins, I always mix them up. But anyway, he was this tremendous intellectual. And he invited Jalal Saab, who was very young in the 1940s, when Pakistan had just been founded, to attend the first AICA Congress, or first or second AICA Congress somewhere in Europe. And he introduced him there because Mr. Sohrawardi was already in Moscow at that time. He was directing some opera and he was very much a part of the European art scene. And he wanted Pakistan also to get that visibility. So Jalal Saab went and he met all these major art critics of that time through AICA. Then, of course, he got busy. he was a civil servant, he got busy, and he was posted outside Pakistan for a long time. And eventually in the 90s, when he came back to Pakistan, he wanted to resurrect that connection. And he founded, with the young critics here in Pakistan, he founded this new chapter of AICA, and he was heading it for a while. And then after that, he said, he was looking for someone to head it. And then he asked me that, Niilofur, would you like to? I think at that time I was the Secretary General of it. And I said, Jalal sir, this is like, quite a big responsibility. He said, no, when I started, I was, much younger than you were. Anyway, I said, if you give us the support, we will. Obviously, it's something we needed to put together. He did. And, we've had that chapter since then. But the problem has been that, sometimes it gets very small, and we are constantly looking for people to be a part of it. That's the way it is, yeah.
And I'm just struck by the fact that, these were civil servants who were thinking this way. And I'm trying to connect that to also the idea that, you need government support for the arts, and you need people with sensibility and an educated mind to think in these terms, that being part of these sorts of organizations and international forums is good for the country.
Absolutely. It gives us visibility at a state level. Because you might have noticed, Maniza, there's a lot of private initiatives. Like the Karachi Biennale is a private initiative. In places like Germany, the Berlin Biennale is majorly funded by the state. The Documenta is funded by state, so is the Venice Biennale, as well as the Kochi Biennale just in our neighborhood. The Kerala state funds it to a great extent, I think a major amount of it.
And Kerala is such an enlightened state.
Yeah, even Sharjah Biennale a lot of it is funded by the local cultural organizations. So, the fact remains, and the Sharjah Foundation actually is probably very embedded in the the social fabric of the establishment there, let's say. So I think that's been really a big problem in Pakistan, because we have the energy, we start these initiatives, but then there is no safety net. There aren't people enough to kind of prop it up and take it to another level. A lot of very good initiatives had not been able to survive because of that. So when we write the history of this whole art scene of Pakistan, you would always see these wonderful art projects that could not go to the next level.
So let's hold that thought for a moment and take a pause here, and we'll come back and talk about this some more.
Okay.
So, Niilofur, I was just thinking about what you just said about how projects and good projects fizzle out because they don't get support from the government. But could it also be, is there a role that's played by the fact that we have within ourselves a culture where we really don't nurture junior people, younger people to come forth, and once there's a head of an institution, that head remains forever till they pass?
I think it's changing. It's definitely changing. Because I've seen it, I saw Ali Imam, he nurtured us, he mentored us, and we have been, Meher and I, Meher also played a role in my, kind of mentoring me to some extent in the earlier years. And now we are nurturing and mentoring other young people. And we also are trying to put into place succession plans, because a lot of organizations need that. They need to kind of gradually hand over, the responsibilities to a younger generation. What has happened is certain values within society have changed while the economic structure of the society hasn't changed. And let me tell you what I mean by that. A lot of us have done voluntary work for a very long time because culture is an area where we still find it's not, let us say it doesn't run like the corporate world. It doesn't run like the advertising world or, other commercial entities. When you set up organizations like, let's say, Nukta, we are well ahead of our time. Even things like the Karachi Biennale, we are doing something that the society around us, maybe to some extent is not ready to support. It's kind of getting the exposure. It's a gradual kind of thing. But that is the same thing happens in a lot of places around the world, particularly, in post-colonial societies where things have really been pulled down for at least 2-3 centuries, and we have to build them. All the institutions have to be built. And of course, we are mired with political and other problems all the time that impact policy, and it impact a lot of things that we need to interact with on a daily basis. So what happens is that it's not always the individuals. When individuals are trying to pass on the baton, even then things are changing so rapidly around us. Like, let me tell you, we founded the Karachi Biennale 8 years ago, right?
Yes.
And obviously, there is a time after doing 4 biennales, you feel you've got a team together that you can hand over things to. Because, but finances do not allow us to build that team. We have teams, small teams. Then those teams have to be let go in that 2-year cycle. Then we start again with a new team because the funds aren't there. And we normally fundraise for the Biennale because that is the main thing. All of us are doing voluntary work there. Our professional time is totally given to the Biennale. And so, obviously, we cannot expect young people to be doing the same thing, putting in that time without really, charging for it. And we want to take on professional people, but obviously, we cannot compensate them the way institutions that are, revenue generating that can, because we're not for profit people. So, there are many, many things that could have been sorted out with time. Like, if there were subsidies given to big cultural organizations, we pay the same tax, although we are not for profit, but when we buy services and commodities, we pay the same tax. When we print a catalog, we pay the same tax as someone else. So a lot of these subsidies, a lot of these kind of supports could help.
But to be the devil's advocate here, why can't these things be done with people's volunteering their time, and young people saying, no, we don't need to get paid for this because we are doing this because for art's sake, we love this. We want to put up the Biennale. It's a great honor. It's going to have such an impact, and money is not an issue for us. And or why can't these things be so rooted, or are they rooted enough in society, in the city around them, that people would be happy to pitch in and work on this like it was a collective or a cooperative. For example, what comes to mind is what we used to call art films out of India. Manthan comes to mind, which is completely financed by individuals in the milk cooperatives who gave 2 rupees each. Farmers donated 2 rupees each and crowdfunded this Indian film, back in the 70s. Why can't...
I think the world has changed drastically since the 70s. But let me tell you one thing. The young people, normally when they come to work with us, they know that they're not going to get the same salary as they would, let us say, in another organization that, did generate revenue. They do take that into consideration, and it's a trade-off. They work for an organization like us where the learning curve is there, it's very steep. Within the 2 years or 1 year they work for us, they do learn a lot. There's a lot of kind of exposure, they network. And I think that is a very positive, because we create that enabling environment for them. Because one of our mandates is to be a platform that not only creates opportunities as an incubator of ideas, but also as a place where artists, young art students can, learn. Capacity building is there, through experience, through whatever other exposure and workshops and things. So I think they do put in that bit, but the environment has changed. You must remember, a lot of us at this stage of our careers are really, we've been there, we've done it, we've established organizations. So they are just starting out. And that difference is there. They're also under pressure to make careers viable. We were not under pressure to make our careers viable. And a lot of my team consists of retired people or semi-retired people, because, they now have the time to give. So, that times have changed. I feel the young people, whenever they can, they do help us. But to have a professional in place, a real succession plan in place is what I'm talking about. So if you have funding, you kind of go and get a professional who has the same kind of experience, and that person takes over. Things like that. This is how big institutions all over the world work. But, having said that, I think we are getting better. If there wasn't so much political, economic upheaval, we would be in a much better place.
But when I look at the art, Niilofur, come out of Pakistan, out of the Biennale, let's stay with the Biennale, in these 8 years, it's been very exciting. And I mean, from the first Biennale on, it's been quite remarkable and vibrant and mind-boggling and making us see things in different ways, and has been placed in unusual settings. That has had to have had an amazing impact on the city.
Yeah, I like to think it has created some impact. Like, we are now talking in terms of, nobody went to let's say, the historic core of Karachi, which is Bandar Road or M.A. Jinnah Road. Nobody went.
No,
but we set up these places.
People that work there, you can't say we went to Bandar Road.
You see what I'm saying, that, you were one of the rare people who went to the bookshop and said, fix that, or, motivated them.
You're saying nobody went to Bandar Road. People worked there, people lived there.
When I say nobody went, I'm talking about the art crowd.
Okay.
You see, I am also looking at, there are always people who, but let's say, let's look at Karachi, how it changed. I mean, there was a Karachi where people didn't live in their little bubbles. People moved around freely. They interacted with society, different communities quite freely. There was this pride in being a very diverse, culturally diverse city, and, economically diverse too. And people were that very open about things. But then we had a lot of political upheaval. the city got polarized, fractured. And then I think the Biennale came out of that, as you probably know, that we felt that art could be something that could bring people together, particularly if we started exhibiting plays in places, heritage sites that would kind of bring back the pride in the city's history. And its community, particularly community. And then there would be also a dialogue between people, let's say, who work and live on Imagina Road and the people who live in the suburbs or other parts of the city. To some extent, that exchange has happened. But of course,
I'm just going to argue with you there and say that I think it had a huge impact amongst a certain crowd that didn't look at these spaces as their spaces. They suddenly started to see things differently and have a look at these spaces and realize that that this was very much part of their city and something to value.
Yeah, I agree with you there. When you give visibility to a place and people get engaged with it, change happens. From that perspective, yeah, and art became a catalyst in that way. So I think from that perspective, Biennale has played a role in mainstreaming art. People don't feel, they can't be a part of that art exhibition if it's in the public space or anywhere else. There is this, it has, taken down that barrier. Definitely.
And so then the second Biennale in Karachi and the third, this is going to be the fourth one, right?
Yes. This will
Are
be
they all going to be, again, exhibited were the second and third also exhibited in public spaces and out on streets or within buildings that were of cultural significance, or were they?
Yes. You see, we use a combination of spaces. We use not-for-profit gallery spaces, like trust-run spaces, the spaces run by the Sindh government, which they now have the Sambara Art Gallery and the VM Art Gallery, or we work in institutions, educational institutions like NED, which is one of the oldest architecture, engineering universities with this heritage space. NJV, of course, is another heritage space.
That was mind-blowing in the first.
Yeah.
That was literally mind-blowing. The NG.
Yes, NJV is this tremendous space. And then we work in public parks, like Bagh Ibn Qasim is a public park that, has thousands of people come there over the weekend. Then we work with the Karachi Zoo and the Frere Hall grounds as well as the historic building. So, we work in different ways. Primarily, these are, in a way, either public spaces or quasi-public spaces. And then in the last Biennale, we worked in the old heritage space. We took over a private home of someone. And, it was just to kind of give people a glimpse of how people lived, let us say, 100 years ago, when they were, then there was this community that had shops underneath and then apartments on top, but they were built in a particular way with a certain aesthetic and planning. So, we displayed art in one of those kind of properties. So I think this is what we do. We give visibility to Karachi's heritage.
And you also, I think, create space to allow younger people to think about how they can live differently.
Absolutely. And also mingle with everyone. You see, the Karachi's main ethos was communities coming together, mingling, understanding, not being, not receding into their own spaces. So I think that has been there. And we work with a lot of school children and college and university students. Again, that's youth element, because Pakistan, as you know, 60% of our population is young. So I think that's also something we do very consciously.
Yeah, I think 70% of our population is below the age of 30.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Tell me, Niilofur, about your publications. There's a book that you have edited with Amin Gulgee and John McCarry called
Yeah, yeah.
Radioactive Decade.
Yes. Pakistan's Radioactive Decade.
Mhm.
Yes. An informal history of the 1970s.
So it's
Right.
this is an informal history of,
Cultural history of the 1970s. Yeah.
and it's called why did you use the name radio?
Interesting
Okay.
question. Actually, Amin came up with that word, radioactive, because remember that was Bhutto's time,
Yes,
and we were putting together this bomb,
we did.
yeah, the
Yes.
nuclear bomb. So it obviously alludes to that.
Mhm.
It is also about something that remains. Radioactivity is something that doesn't go away. It may diminish, it may rise, but it stays.
Well, we
You
say
know, it,
Bhutto's time, but by July 5th, 1977, it was Ziaul Haq's time. So it was pretty
yeah,
radioactive by then.
yeah. Well, a different kind of radioactive. It's a peculiar decade.
Yes.
At the big, and it's kind of book ended by two very tragic kind of happenings. One was, of course, the loss of East Pakistan, which became Bangladesh. And then we had Bhutto come in and bring the promise of democracy. And, we sort of again, the nation was trying to kind of grapple with that and, trying to be resilient. Then at the other end was Bhutto's got ousted and he was hung in the end. So, we had this and a dictator took over that we all know messed up the country bad time, in a very bad way. All dictatorships are bad, but this one with his ideology was worse. So we had this very tragic decade,
Yes.
and everyone remembers it differently. Some people celebrate it, but when we started documenting it, first, I must say it was Amin's idea he invited me to curate the show with him. The Radioactive Decade, the show was called. We invited a lot of young people, young artists to interpret that period. So it had a section in which we had the masters, because 1970 was a modernist time. So we have a lot of modernist masters. Part of that exhibition, we brought in works of modernists. And then a lot of young people from their research and memories of the family and everything created works. It was very important for them to revisit this time, because there is this whole kind of the contradictions within it. Different people remember it differently. Like there was this young artist whose family had to flee East Pakistan. So he had the family had a very difficult time after they fled from there. So, he brought his memories. Then there was someone who had a different kind of memories, because there was fashion, there was all kind of, renaissance of the arts, as we called. There was a time when, liberal environment sort of gave birth to these creative energies. So, that is one time. So, we wanted to capture all of that in its totality.
Yes.
So once that exhibition was put together, we thought that we would do a catalog of it. But from that catalog grew this book. And we have 40 writers in it, 40 pieces of text in it, 40 texts in it. And they're about different things, like, the advertising at that time. We've interviewed people. The first time a film was made of a certain kind, Javed Jabbar made this film, The Last Mountain. So, sorry?
Beyond the Last Mountain.
Yes, Beyond the Last Mountain. So all these things are documented in this book. And we felt it was important to document it. And,
Mhm.
there is no kind of this, nothing is black and white. I think that was another underlying message.
Mhm.
Memory is important. It should be treated with respect. We should respect other people's memories as well. So,
Mhm.
this book, there is nothing black and white.
Mhm.
And something that we view as something maybe an optimistic time, obviously is not always optimistic. I mean, we had Balochistan, which was again, going through a very difficult time. And so a lot was happening in the country. We had the prisoners of war, and yet the country was also, experiencing this kind of, let's say, a lot of creativity.
Yes, indeed. And the more I think of it, what a great name, Radioactive Decade.
Yeah, yeah.
Decade. Mm.
It's quite something. And I think it does represent that thing. And it also, I think, when I was talking to Amin and we were discussing, and he was saying that, you know, we still have, you know, something from that period that has, sort of remained in the society. Some kind of optimism, some hope, some naive hope. Because as you know, Pakistan's had a very tumultuous history in the last 50 years. So there's still a certain period, for whatever reason, is seen as something very special. And I think it's the 70s.
Yes, I would agree with you. The 70s were special because we were young.
Yeah, naive, the innocence was there.
Everybody
Yeah.
thinks, I'm sure these younguns now who are 20, 25, 30 are going to look back at this decade and say, there was something really special. Yes, it was because you were young. You were innocent and naive and you were hopeful. But there is something amazing about Pakistan with all its challenges and all that has come at it and all that it has thrown at itself. It is
Yeah.
an excitingly vibrant and creative place. You
Absolutely.
think, Niilofur, creativity comes out of tremendous angst and crisis?
Um, I think it's definitely creates a very intense kind of response. It does.
Mhm.
But it also makes you, despite all your frustrations, it also gives you the energy to grapple with challenges.
Mhm.
You become resilient, you become strong. You also become frustrated and tired from time to time.
Mhm.
But I think Pakistan is very special in many ways. There's always hope. There's always this thing. I look at Karachi mainly because I spent most of my life here, and I feel this is the city. Despite everything that it has seen, it can come back. There's something about it. It can come back and deal with things that come its way.
Mhm. But it always does.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It does come back. And maybe it's because of the people. They're very hardy, not easily put down kind of people.
Do
Despite all the creativity, everything, there is a resilience.
you think it
Yeah.
has something to do with the light in Karachi? There seems to be a special quality of light that in Karachi. There's this certain
Yeah.
people
I,
have to.
I I don't know about the light, but I think it's because we are such a diverse people. We just have this very big heart, and we are very diverse. Because I'll tell you, if I sit in a meeting, you can be sure that this table has people that the mother tongues are different.
Mhm.
We'll have someone come in, he'll be talking in Pashto, or he'll be talking in, I mean, I'm talking about people around, we're talking maybe in, Sindhi,
Mhm.
and people around the table will have, come from all parts of the country.
Mhm.
So the fact is this, there is this ability to negotiate all this.
Mhm.
And I think that makes Karachi special,
Mhm.
that you open yourself up to experience. You're not afraid to have experiences. You're not afraid to fail. I think that's what Karachi is. You're not afraid to fail.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Not afraid to fail, because you know you're going to fail every day, and then you're going to pick yourself up and keep on
Exactly. And you will have successes. And those successes will be important, to sort of move ahead, to give you more energy to move ahead. Because, that's what I tell young people. I work with a lot of young people, and I tell them several things. We talk about decolonization, and, I feel in the last 50 years, I've seen decolonization. I've lived through it. When I was very young at school, and I had my parents who, moved from another part of the world to come here, what is Karachi today. And they always said that, the thing highest on our agenda was to reclaim our culture, to reclaim the knowledge, which is so deeply embedded in our language, in our ways of living and thinking. This is what they said. And I think I grew up with that, sensibility. And I think a lot of people did. So that was this first understanding of decolonization. We may not have called it decolonization. We may have said, identity, a new Pakistani identity. You can call it anything you like, but it is undoing of an epistemic reality that existed during the colonial period. So, that was my first encounter with the fact that we need to reclaim. And I think even as teachers that, were there, Imam Saab, Bashir Mirza, a lot of these major artists, this is what they were also trying to do. While they were modernists, they were also trying to interpret things in their way, something that they assimilated, something which was their own and came from this soil. So I think these were the things that I saw throughout my life, actually, as as someone who, after leaving art school, very consciously as well. And then that's why we talked about Meher's work, we talked about ASNA, and I, currently I work with AICA, and we work on projects that I've developed for them, which was the ruptured histories, which is again about looking at the entire world. And my concept is that it's not just the colonized people who have suffered, but the nations of the colonizing powers have also suffered.
I agree.
Because nobody told them that, that the kind of atrocities they did in the colonies and the fruits that they were benefiting from, all the looting and all this extraction that they did in the colonies, which these countries benefited from, and even the slave trade, publicly in those countries, it was always glossed over. There was this hyper nationalism. There was this hyper kind of thing that, we are the people who are going to change their lives for the better in the colonies.
Well, I'm not going to give them such an easy out. There was racism and bigotry.
But it's coming from a reality. You see, I'm not giving them an easy way out. I'm just talking about the deception. I'm talking about deception. I'm not talking that, there wasn't racism. Sometimes I ponder on it and I think every place has certain degrees of racism. Sometimes it's institutionalized, like you look at South Africa and many, many other countries. And of course, the United States, we have this whole slave history. But you also do look at who were the people that colonized, which is the East India Company, and then you look at other such institutions all over. They also exploited their own people. So I think the realization has to come from within, because there is a resistance to decolonization also.
Yes, I agree. There seems to be a resistance to decolonization. Totally agree with you.
Yeah. And you see it being played out in, as you said, racism, academia, You see it being played out in many ways, that they are unable, there's a blind spot. They use anything and everything they can not to give freedom to other people or to listen to their stories.
We can see that playing out in the world today, that watching and witnessing in real time.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's all linked.
Yes,
because, it's political, it's social, it's very deeply embedded, certain attitudes.
Certain attitudes, the whole economies of countries will depend on this structure that must not be shaken.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
today I had this wonderful conversation that I'd like to share with you, because I feel art does not stand alone. It has to, link itself with all that is around it. And, we are working on this project for young people who are going to look at the food supply and the food history and a cultivation history of Karachi, which is this large urban place. Because it wasn't always this large, sprawling urban space of 24 million people. It also had pockets of places where, food grew, and food was sort of transported through this place. It was sent out of the country. It was brought into the country. And the young people need to know the real, kind of stories behind it. And of course, the whole idea of production under the colonial period, when they turned our agrarian land that fed the farmer into cash crop land, cultivation. And that transition also needs to be looked upon, and we're not teaching our young people about it. So maybe by introducing thematics like what we have for the next Biennale, we can explore that.
Very much so. Just the political history and empire building and colonization through cotton and sugar cane.
Indigo.
Yes.
All the cash crops.
All the cash crops. Cotton and sugar cane that deplete the water table.
Absolutely.
Cola and Coca-Cola that take our water, put sugar in it, and sell it back and cause diabetes. All these things, these need to be looked at. And I'm sure that the 4th Biennale will look at all these things. Niilofur, thank you so much for this wonderful conversation.
Thank you, Maniza. I think it's been my pleasure, kind of discussing and kind of sharing all this with you. And thank you for inviting me.
I learned so much from you, Niilofur. Every time I have a conversation with you, I learned so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Okay. Then bye-bye. Okay, bye. Take care. Bye.